Because of discrimination, historians usually did not include activities of northern black men involved in the Civil War in their history books. Many people thought that the African Americans had been freed without a struggle of their own, but they, however, were gravely wrong. Not only had the African Americans fought for the North, they were an important part of the Union's army. Before the war, though, the free blacks of the North were segregated as well. They could not get good education or jobs that paid well. Their houses and facilities, such as bathrooms or restaurants, were separated from the white people's constructions, and the African Americans usually got badly made and cheap buildings. At that time, blacks were considered an inferior race because Southerners had to argue that blacks' brain power was not enough for them to do anything else besides being a slave. All slave supporters told this to themselves and everyone else for slavery to be acceptable until it was believed, even in the North. So, they did not want whites and blacks having children to keep the race as it was. Black people in the North were required to carry a certificate to prove their freedom, or else they would be sent back to their masters. All of this made life tough for Northern blacks, but they were still willing to fight for the Union when the Civil War came in 1861. At first, only the Navy accepted them, but only as cooks or cleaners until 1862, when the Navy officials realized that the blacks had been important, so they let them become sailors. In 1863, it was the Army's turn. Abraham Lincoln, who was the President of the United States at that time, was worried, like all of his military officials, that blacks would behave cowardly and would not be able to obey complex orders because of their supposed lack of brain power, but he still issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which was an executive order that commanded all Southern slaves would be freed if the South did not surrender, and later it declared that black men were allowed to enroll in the army. Unfortunately, African Americans were also discriminated in the military. They were paid $3 less than the white soldiers. They were not allowed to become anything more than a private. They could not go in the same units as white men, and they had substandard weapons. The black soldiers were treated roughly in the battlefield as well. If they got captured, they were sold to slavery. And there was one horrible battle when the Confederacy took over a Union's fort called Fort Pillow, where they slaughtered 300 of the defenders after they had surrendered, 230 of which were black. At the end of the war, 10% of all the Northern soldiers were blacks, and almost no official doubted the African Americans' bravery after having it proven it in numerous battles, like on July of 1863 in the state of South Carolina, where the 54th Massachusetts Voluntary Infantry, which was comprised of only black soldiers, assaulted Fort Wagner. Many blacks were injured and died, but they bravely continued the attack. One soldier called William Harvey Kirby had been wounded, but he volunteered to carry the U.S. flag while the soldiers charged. This man later received the Medal of Honor.